Okay, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, friends of ISAS, a very warm welcome to all of you to yet another event of our Ambassadors Lecture Series. And this afternoon, it is my privilege to host Ambassador Dr. Usen Suleimen of Kazakhstan. He'll speak to a very topical subject in our contemporary times, which is China's Belt Road Initiative. He'll focus on the implications of the project for the region, which would, of course, be of very great interest to all of us here, scholars and guests. It's noteworthy, by the way, that in its earliest conceptual avatar, the idea was first propounded by Xi Jinping in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, as Silk Road economic belt. This was in 2013. And since then, it evolved through further refinement of the concept at an ASEAN moot initially, and then finally emerging in this present form as the Belt and Road Initiative, in short, BRI. Clearly, Kazakhstan and ASEAN are therefore closely linked to the florescence, to the flowering of the idea. We will examine Kazakhstan's involvement today. The backdrop of our times is the diminution of American leadership role in much of the world, in much of the global scene, and the rise or re-rise, in whichever way you wish to describe it, of China. Now, these developments are very closely watched by the Central Asian countries, and they include Kazakhstan. Its leader, President Nursultan Nazarbayev, is the architect of Project Kazakhstan 2050, a strategy that's purported to ensure Kazakhstan's position as one of the first 30 most developed countries in the world by that time, that is 2050. President Nazarbayev is a person of prodigious intellect and capability, and through his stewardship of the Republic, the region is witnessing a greater cooperation among all Central Asian countries. Not so long ago, I had the privilege to participate in a major conference in that country at a forum known as the Astana Club. I was able to witness at first hand the burgeoning cooperation emerging between the Central Asian countries, feeding a sense of Eurasian solidarity and a desire to connect with other regions, including South Asia and Southeast Asia, from Afghanistan to Singapore. So let us hear Ambassador Suleimen speak to these issues. You have the floor, Ambassador, for the next 45 minutes, and then we will open up for a Q&A segment. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Iftekhar. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Kazakhstan is the 9th biggest country in the world, and I promise that I won't talk to you 9 hours, just 1 hour, maybe at most, because being the 9th biggest country in the world, there's a lot of things to tell you about it. It is actually an honor for me to deliver a lecture at ISAS, and I thank the Dr. Iftekhar A Chowdhury and the whole team for arranging this August meeting. And before I go to the main part of today's presentation on Belt and Road Initiative, I would deliver to you briefly about Kazakhstan's economic potential and foreign policy achievements. And I hope that many of you have some knowledge about Kazakhstan and find it interesting in shaping your knowledge on my country, its economic potential, strategic programs of development and foreign policy objectives and achievements, and as well as international achievements and initiatives. As you know, Kazakhstan has gained its independence in December 1991, and we immediately have mounted the policy of economy first and politics the second. And this slogan was derived by my president from Lee Kuan Yew. LKY has visited Kazakhstan in September 1991, 2 months prior to the collapse of the Soviet Union and 2 months prior to Kazakhstan's gaining independence. That time I was a protocol officer and I was translating for both leaders for 4 hours. And during those 4 hours I found out that my president is a quick learner of capitalism. We were brought under the Soviet system, under the commandment system, under the communist system, and we never known about capitalism, nothing. And taking into account that my president is a very quick-witted guy, a highly intellectual, because to become the leader of the Communist Party in the Republic, which is one of the 15 republics of the Soviet Union, there were a very strict criteria of choosing and selecting communist leaders, which started their career from an instructor, the lowest step, and while they reached the level of the Republican communist leader, they would never overstep any grades of career, be that within the time frame or by posts. And only then, when you reach the level of the leader of the republic, you could jump over, having good pullover or good connections, jump over to the Soviet Union countries level and to be in Moscow, which my president has survived, and on the brink of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, he was also one of the candidates for the president of the Soviet Union. And to survive this leap over from the Republican to the country level, you should be so smart to handle and tackle intrigues around you. It's like in any government, if you want to survive, you should be a very cunning, coward, quick-witted guy. And this helped my president to be at power at the beginning and to be now the president for the 27th consecutive year. And at that meeting for 4 hours with Lee Kuan Yew, my president has taken this slogan from Singapore, first economics, then politics. Actually, Kazakhstan has overtaken and replicated many Singaporean examples. We have set up our Samruk Kazna national holding, which is exactly Temasek. We have Kazakh SBF. We have Kazakh IE. We have the fund for the talented youth, which is called Bolashak, the Future, which helped to send abroad to the best universities the talented youth, and now they're back. Within these 20 years, we have 13,000 students who studied at the best universities around the world, and now they're back, and half of them are running the government and the major national holdings of Kazakhstan. Over 27 years of independence under the leadership of President Nursultan Nazarbayev, we have made a tremendous progress, and now we are the economic leader in Central Asia due to the fact that our leader was so pragmatic to use our national resources wisely and to utilize them for the benefit of the people. You know that we are not only the 9th biggest country in the world, and we are the biggest landlocked country. We are the most remote territory from the high seas, but we are #1 producer of uranium. We are #2 producer of zinc and copper. We produce 22 million tons of hot-class wheat, grain. We produce fine cotton, and we have all chemical elements beneath our soil. 70% of our economy's income comes from selling crude oil. And these years we were using that oil to prosper our country. Actually, as I told you, that this pragmatic approach to economy first, politics later, although these two policies were extremely challenging, we have managed to be one of the most secure countries in Central Asia, although the most part of the former republics of the Soviet Union are still in poor shape and still are suffering some interethnic and interreligious conflicts, and we have managed to avoid those disasters. In 1997, my president has initiated the program which was called Strategy 2030, which was meant to bring my country into the 50 best economies in the world. You know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, all the 15 republics found themselves at a very poor shape. The unified economy system of the Soviet Union was collapsed. Actually, during the Soviet times, during the Stalin times, Stalin was a very odious figure who had repressed many intellectuals in the Soviet Union, who had a nickname, an Iron Fist. He has managed to create an economy of the Soviet Union in a way that all the main factories were built in Russia, while all the raw materials fields were in the other 14 republics. And there was an order, an instruction from Moscow that the factories should not be built near the fields in those republics. One of the reasons is that to make those 14 republics dependent on Moscow. Another is taking into account that the population of the Soviet Union was 250 million people. In order to create jobs, it was necessary to build 3,000 to 10,000 kilometers long railways from the oil fields or from the raw material fields and to deliver them to Russia, which of course means that they need be people to deliver them just to create jobs. That's why when the Soviet Union crashed, all the republics found themselves with no infrastructure. Same story happened with Kazakhstan. Our budget was nil at that time, in 1992, 91. The same story happened with other 14 republics of the Soviet Union. And first 5 years, it was a real stagnation in economy, both in Kazakhstan and other. But we were blessed by the Lord with our natural resources, which we started using them wisely. Actually, at the beginning of our independence, our GDP was $600 per capita. Nowadays, it is 10,000. And it is the highest among the CIS countries nowadays. There is a saying of one wise man saying that the Stone Age came to an end not because we had a lack of stones, and the oil age will come to an end not because we have a lack of oil. As a result, today we have new industries which did not exist in Kazakhstan in Soviet times. That strategy 2030 we have fulfilled in December 2012. It's 2 times shorter period has taken us to reach that goal to be 49th best economy in the world. This provoked my president to initiate another strategy which is called Kazakhstan 2050. And Mr. Dr. Chowdhury was already said that the aim is to make Kazakhstan to be among the 30 best economies in the world. And this program was exactly meant for that purpose. Within that strategy, we have began to implement the new economic policy, which was called Nurly Zhol, which means bright path. It is a $9 billion economic stimulus to develop and modernize infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, housing, and IT infrastructure. And I will explain about it later on when I come to the main topic. And all these efforts within 27 years were not in vain, and in October 2017, Kazakhstan has been ranked 36 among 190 economies in the ease of doing business, according to the latest World Bank annual ratings. And while the GDP growth in 2017 amounted to 4%. Another achievement of my country is that due to the good inflow of petrodollars, due to high prices on oil around the world for many decades, we managed to buy creme de la creme of the technology around the world. And my president has initiated the creation of a new capital, which is in the middle of my country, which was called Astana. And this country was built from the scratch within 14 years. And it's a nice city with modern buildings, and 3 of them were designed by Norman Foster. We were so rich that we spared money elsewhere. And after the last only 2008 crisis, we started sort of being economizing and thinking that we should be pragmatic more about it. You see, at that time, 1997, when this decision came to move the capital, many people and many neighbors were skeptical about the thing. How come the country is not well-grounded economically yet, but you're already spending so much money on the new thing, while you could use the same amount of money to feed people, to increase their social package, etc., etc. And at that time, I was also sort of surprised by the initiative of my president. And the neighboring presidents were saying, hey, look, we cannot plan for 5 years ahead. You're planning for 30 years. How come? But nowadays, I acknowledge that it was a good visionary of my president, because last 2 years since I'm ambassador to Singapore, many high officials came to Singapore, and we visited many agencies, many enterprises. And what I found out that every entity in Singapore plans for 15, 20 years ahead. Why not, if you're already well-grounded? And that vision of my president made that Kazakhstan is the leading economy in Central Asia nowadays. As for our ethnic component in the country, we're the country hosting 136 nationalities, representing 33 confessions. I want to brag that on the same street, on the 4 corners of the crossroad, we have a synagogue, mosque, Catholic Church, and Orthodox Church. And since our independence, within these 27 years, we had no one case of inter-ethnic clashes or on the religious basis. We are most peaceful country in the world. And the reason that we are so big and multinational country, that Kazakhstan was the place to exile many nationalities. During the Second World War, the prisoners of war from Germany were sent to Kazakhstan. During Stalin period, when there was oppression against the Caucasus nations, in the Caucasus, many small nationalities were deported to Kazakhstan. Political prisoners who were against Stalin politics were sent to Kazakhstan Gulag concentration camp. We had prisoners of war from Japan during the Second World War. We have a big diaspora of Polish population, of Korean population. During the Second World War, every third family of Kazakhstan were adopting an orphan who lost their parents during the Second World War fighting against Nazis, Germany. You know, the many factories and many enterprises were moved from Russia to Kazakhstan, to the rear from the front, and many people were sent, especially women and children, and every third Kazakh family was adopting, and many of them were leaving. My granddad has adopted a Chechen guy, for example. My president's family has adopted one Caucasian guy. It was almost in every family. And you see, we are not nationalistic at all, because it is in our blood with Kazakhs that we are very open and hospitable, because it's in our genes. Originally, Kazakhs were worshippers of the skies, 10 grains. Then we were turned to be Zoroastrians. Then Arabians came and shifted us to Islam. And nowadays we're a Muslim society, but we're a secular society. We don't go to extremities. And we were nomads from the ancient times. That's why our territory is the next biggest. We were conquering territories from Turkmenistan, from Russia. We were the only tribes who could, the only warriors who could withstand the Genghis Khan warriors, who has conquered half of China and half of the world, but only our tribes could be at par with them when they were fighting with them. We lived in the yurts, which is a shelter, and our doors were never locked. And whenever the bypasser stranger comes to our place, we were giving him the last food we had. We were giving everything for him. And the reason was that this bypasser was the bearer of the news around the world. We were isolated in the steppes, just dealing with our stocks of sheep, horses, and camels. That's why we were sort of isolated from the outer world. And any stranger coming, he was delivering news what's happening around in the world. That was a sort of inheritance of our nature. This helped us to avoid these interesting clashes in my country. Moreover, my president, to consolidate the society, has initiated in 2003, the World Congress of the leaders of traditional and non-traditional religious organizations. By now we have held 5 of them. During the 3rd Congress, the people from different corners of the world who sat at the round table, be that Dalai Lama or Taoist or Israeli or Iranian, they voted for creation of the secretariat of this Congress. And the utmost aim of it is to create the United Religious Organization, which will be a sort of United Nations organization with the headquarters in Kazakhstan. We have already worked out its structure, and in the future, maybe in 5-10 years, Kazakhstan will be the headquarters of the United Religious Organizations. I want to boast upon our peaceful policy that there are only 2 international organizations in which 2 hostile countries are members. It's Israel and Iran. It is the United Nations, and the second one is SICA. It's a Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, which is a prototype of the OSCE in Europe. We managed to have by now 30 members from mainly Asian countries, and at each meeting we have Iranian and Israelis sit at the same table, although not next, but at the same table. This is shortly about our peaceful coexistence between different nationalities. In 1994, my president has initiated the creation of the Eurasian Economic Union. It is a sort of ASEAN, sort of European Union, because he wanted to use the potential of Central Asian states, which are all Muslim and we're close to each other. Actually, 5 Central Asian states, we speak Turkic group of languages. Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek, Turkmen, Turkish, Azeri. 5 languages are the same group of languages. I understand 98% Kyrgyz, 70% Uzbek, 50% Turkish, 50% Azeri, 30% Turkmen. This is the same origin. It's like Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian, which is the same group of languages. And in order to create this union, it took 22 years to agree on 8 pages of creation of this union. In 2016, this dream of my president came true, and 3 countries, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus, have inked the creation of this union. A month thereafter, Armenia and Kyrgyzstan joined this entity. And next year, Vietnam has signed free trade agreement with Eurasian Economic Union. Nowadays, it's already the 2.5 consecutive year. Singapore is negotiating FTA with Eurasian Economic Union. China, Korea, India are negotiating. And last year, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong expressed hope that FTA between Singapore and Kazakhstan will be signed early next year. This Eurasian Economic Union is very vital issue for Kazakhstan, especially FTA agreements. Kazakhstan, as I said, is producer of hard class wheat, which has a very high consistency of gluten. Now we export it to Vietnam due to FTA. Out of that grain, we produce very good quality of vodka, which is sometimes better than Russian. We export it to Vietnam. We produce a chocolate, non-organic chocolate, which is the same taste as Swiss and Belgium chocolate. My colleagues from the diplomatic corps know the taste of vodka and of Kazakh vodka and chocolate. They can prove.
Confined to the diplomatic corps, is it?
Yeah, yes, sure. And I'll tell a very funny story. When the first rolling stock of grain and vodka was delivered to Ho Chi Minh 2 years ago, it was stuck at the customs union because the parliament of Vietnam forgot to ratify that FTA agreement. But when they heard that it's vodka, they ratified it same day because they love liquors, actually. And when I was appointed here, my president called me and said, no political issues outstanding between Kazakhstan and Singapore, just trade and economic. Actually, within this quarter of a century, we didn't have enough resources and time to pay attention to Southeast Asia and to Asia Pacific. Actually, these 2 areas, Central Asia and Asia Pacific, are close to each other. And your task is to open it up. And I'm so happy that within 2 years, this sort of process has begun to opening up 2 regions to each other, because in September 2016, Mr. ASM Go Chok Tong visited my country. And he is a sort of a guy who goes abroad and sniffs the country and comes back and tells your businessman, this is a country where you can go now to deal with, to invest in, or this country is not ready for that with their whatever reason. And when he came back here, he said to big companies here that Kazakhstan is ready and open up for collaborating with. And nowadays we have several big companies from Singapore which are now investing in Kazakhstan. Among them is former Foreign Minister George Yeo, who is leading carrier logistics company in Hong Kong and here. He has opened his subsidiary in Almaty. Mainhard Group, which is a big consulting engineering, opened their office in Astana, for which I'm very happy. 2 days ago, my president received Onseng Beng, who is the hotel company, big guy from your country who wants to invest in tourism and hotels. So the process is on. Another good thing that this One Belt and Road helped us now to open up to each other. I'll come to that a little bit later. Last year, we held Expo 2017 exhibition. Prior to that, when we were bidding for that, we outbid Belgium by 154 votes against 60. Due to the topic of the Expo, because it was the future energy. As I said, that the age of oil will end not because of ending oil, but we are thinking about the future to move towards sort of not oil or green energy. That was the main topic, which helped to attract 4 million visitors to my country. And we have built a small city within Astana, which is a nice, beautiful place now. After the Expo, it is the place for 3 entities. One of them is Kazakh Temasek, another is the Center for Development of Green Technology, and another is Astana International Financial Center. By the way, Hanema Yakub visited the opening ceremony of Expo 2017. It was her last trip to abroad in the capacity of the Speaker of the Parliament, and Kazakh people believe that her visit to Kazakhstan was a stimulus for her to win the presidency elections in Singapore. Actually, she also met with the Astana International Financial Center governor. My president has initiated the creation of the Astana International Financial Center, which is a sort of to make an even distribution of similar centers around the world. When we look at the world map, Dubai Center, Singapore Center, every region has its own sort of place where there's a international financial center, but not Eurasia, not Central Asia. And to sort of to fill in this gap, we have created Astana International Center, which is a prototype of Singapore, Dubai, Chicago, Tokyo, etc. This Astana International Financial Center is meant for being a hub and also to facilitate the activity of the One Belt and Road initiative. In January of this year, it was created. It was officially starting its work, and on the 5th July this year, there would be an inaugural ceremony of that entity in Astana, and we invite you to participate, especially you, Mr. Chowdhury, if you can come. Mr. Eduardo will attend that event. Now, a few words about Kazakhstan's foreign policy. As the legacy of the Soviet Union, we inherited the fourth biggest nuclear weaponry in the world. This arsenal was 101,000 warheads. We could be a sort of a Muslim country which is a nuclear power. But taking into account that we're a peaceful country, and to prove to other countries and to be example on disarmament, on nuclear disarmament, my president has taken an initiative to renounce the nuclear weapon in my country. Many in the parliament were opposing that, saying that this is a prestige of the country. While my president said anything which is linked to war is not prestigious. In 1993, Yasser Arafat, Palestinian leader, has taken a board of the charter flight leased by Muammar Gaddafi, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi from Libya. He arrived in Almaty, and the plane was packed with $5 billion US. And the message was not to abandon nuclear weapon, to make it a country, a good shield to Middle East, to withstand the United States and other 4 big nuclear powers, to show, to play muscles that we are also a sort of Muslim world who have its own nuclear weapon. At that time, $5 billion was 1.5 budget of the whole Kazakhstan. My president declined that. Although I would maybe agree, because at that time there were so many poor guys, there was a poverty, it was no social package at all. But nowadays it helped us to propagate the nuclear disarmament policy around the world. Actually, this was one of the main things which helped Kazakhstan to become the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for 2017 and 2018. Prior to that, it took 6 years to negotiate with IAEA to create the Bank of Low-Enriched Uranium in Kazakhstan. You know that the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site was the place for blasting and tests of nuclear weapons. And during the 60 years of Soviet Union, over 494 blasts were done on the territory of Kazakhstan, which resulted that the whole region has the big portion of population which are deformed ones. We have children with no legs, no arms. And there were blasts done on surface, beneath the soil, in the air, in the water. And those shafts now, which are empty, which we have still have there after we declared ourselves as a non-nuclear country, they are now used for keeping low-enriched uranium as a bank, and any country can come and preserve their uranium in my country and then use them gradually for the purposeful areas. And 2 years ago in Vienna, we signed the creation of this Bank of the low-enriched uranium, which is now useful for many things. We are good mediators on the international arena. In 2010, we were chairing, for the first time, the Central Asian state, we were chairing the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And after 11 years of break of the summits, we managed to facilitate that the next summit of the OSCE was held in Astana in December 2010. It's after 11 years when OSCE was shrinking because of the conflicts of interest, and you know that OSCE is a consensus-based organization like ASEAN. And during our chairmanship in January, there happened the color revolution in neighboring Kyrgyzstan. And immediately my president assigned the chair of the OSCE, at that time our foreign minister, and designated him to Bishkek, to the capital, and this helped to prevent the bloodshed of the people there. In 2014 and early 15, where the crisis in Ukraine came out, Kazakhstani president has called Ukrainian president and Russian president and Belarusian, and it helped to facilitate, to arrange 2 Minsk summits. And due to the respect to my president, because he's the eldest president out of the former Soviet communists within the 15 republics of the Soviet Union. We have hosted 2 rounds of negotiations in Almaty on Iranian nuclear deal when P5+1 in 2013, they gathered in Almaty. It helped to strike on this deal. As well, we are directly participating in the implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and unfortunately Donald Trump has withdrawn from it, but I heard that President Rouhani has said that they will continue with the other countries without US, and I'm happy that Germany keeps themselves in this agreement, which will go on. In 2016, you remember when the jet fighter of the Russian Federation was killed by Syrian opposition, and this caused the Turkish guys, and this caused some rift between Turkey and Russia, and my president has called Erdogan and Putin, explaining the real situation, and this rift, there is no more anymore. Our country's neutrality helped to hold 9 rounds of negotiations on Syria in Astana. Although it was a sort of opposed by the United States, the initiator of these talks, like Turkey, Iran, and Russia, they managed to come 9 times to Kazakhstan, and since the 6th round, the opposition, the armed opposition of the Syria, are participating in it. And the last round has ended 2 days ago. And there was an idea that the platform for negotiations from Kazakhstan will be moved and proposed to Sochi by Putin. But the leader of the armed opposition of Syria said, for us, the only place for negotiations is Astana. We'll move nowhere. Neither Singapore, nor Mongolia, no North Korea, no Sochi, nothing. That's why they find Kazakhstan as a neutral country, and this affiliation of us to be a secular Muslim society plays a significant role in it. As I said to you, we are the non-permanent member of the Security Council for 2017 and 18. And when we were at the inaugural session for this, our membership, my president has delivered a statement which was called Kazakhstan's Concept and Vision for Sustaining Global Partnership for a Secure, Just, and Prosperous World. And he outlined the following priorities, which is achieving a world free of nuclear weapons, eliminating threat of global war and settling local conflicts, promoting interests of Central Asia while strengthening regional security and cooperation, countering terrorism, peace and security in Africa, ensuring an inextricable link between security and sustainable development, and adapting Security Council and the entire UN system to the threats and challenges of the 21st century. Recently, I have seen the movie of the documentary about my president. He was saying, when I was a kid, a teenager, and I was watching the UN meetings, I had a dream that one day Kazakhstan will be chairing that organization. And in January this year, Kazakhstan was the president of the United Nations Security Council. And one of the meetings was devoted to the nuclear disarmament, and my president was chairing it. And after that meeting, he said that that dream came true. We were the first ever in the history of Central Asia country who chaired the UN Security Council, and we represented not only Kazakhstan, but also the whole Central Asia. Prior to that meeting, we were thinking about reforming the United Nations. You know, every entity has its own lifespan, and then the time comes to renovate it. And in our view, in Kazakhstan's view, that so many structures of the UN are now exhausted, and we need to mount the new strategy. And we proposed, and in now 2015, during the 70th session of the UN General Assembly, my president has initiated the formation of the UN's new modern paradigm called New Future Strategy. This is an abbreviation of which stands for N for nuclear, E energy, W for water, F for food, as well as U mutual understanding, T for trust, U R urgent reforms and efficiency. This is briefly about my economy and international efforts and foreign policy. Now let me try to tackle within the rest 15 minutes on the main topic, which is actually so widely now discussed, being also in Singapore, because this is already the fifth sort of event in which I'm participating, which is devoted to Belt and Road Initiative. As Dr. Iftekhar A Chowdhury said, that the initiative was initiated by Xi Jinping in Astana. A year later, last year, in May 15, 29 countries gathered in Beijing for the forum devoted to One Belt, One Road. All of them expressed their emotion in the support, but actually the most excited country about it is Kazakhstan. Why? The Belt and Road length is almost 7,000 kilometers, and almost 3,000 goes through Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is the buckle for that initiative. I'm so happy that it will help Kazakhstan to fix infrastructure. As I told you, that we, the former republics of the Soviet Union, we were lacking it. Now it's a good opportunity, and we figured out that the only transit of containers through my country will bring to our budget $5 billion a year, which we can spend not only for infrastructure along the roads, but to facilitate the social sector along that route. Actually, initially it was, the initiation was Silk Road Economic Belt, then it was One Belt, One Road on land, and then in November 2015, Xi Jinping, delivering his speech at ASEAN meeting in Jakarta, he proposed the maritime Silk Road for the 21st century. Then these two initiatives were combined, and now it's called BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. You know that currently more than 90% of the freight traffic between Asia and Europe is done via maritime routes. But with this initiative, we can sort of facilitate that capitalists benefit from it, because delivery of goods to Europe via on-land route through China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus to Europe will shorten the wait 2 times. Actually, it is, on the one hand, is good for sensitive and perishable goods to be delivered quicker rather than. First time when I heard about this initiative and looked at the map, we figured out that the container from Beijing to London takes 13 days. And in January 2017, the first train of goods was delivered from Beijing to London within 13 days, while the same goods could be delivered to there by 45 days by maritime route. One container on land costs $7,000, maritime container 5,000, but if you multiply 7,000 by 13 and compare it with 5,000 by 45, there's the economic viability of it. Over the past 10 years, what I missed, prior to this One Belt, One Road initiative, I'm so happy that pragmatism and vision of my president coincided with the Chinese one, because a year before that, we had started implementing our Nur-Lajol project, which is called Bright Path, which is a $9 billion program to facilitate the infrastructure in Kazakhstan and to turn my country into the transcontinental logistics hub. And over the past 10 years, about $30 billion has been invested into the development of transport industry. Over 2,000 kilometers of railways have been built. 6,000 kilometers of roads have been reconstructed. The port capacities in the Caspian Sea, which is a landlocked sea, has been increased up to 23.5 million tons, and as well as 15 airports have been reconstructed. 2 years ago, we have completed our part of construction of the highway, which is called Western China, Western Europe. China has completed its part. We have completed its 2 years. It is a 6-lane road of 2,799 kilometers from China's borderline to Russia borderline. And now Russia is working on their part to complete it. And quite recently, a month ago, when President Putin was talking to the parliament of Russia in April, he said that China and Kazakhstan has completed their obligations with regards to Western China, Western Europe. Now I urge Russian companies to expedite that activity to make that the goods from Southeast Asia will be delivered to Europe by this road, including through the railway. Kazakhstan's strategy for developing transport and multimodal transport is laid in the following routes. It is from China to Europe via Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus, as I said. Then from China to Central Asia and Persian Gulf. Then north-south transport corridor. And from China to Europe via the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, which is called the Middle Corridor or TRANS-CASPIAN route. On the main route, China-Europe, China, the volume of transit freight doubled in 2017 and amounted to more than 200,000 containers compared to 100,000 in 2016, and backloading from Europe to China was ensured at 60%. One of the drawbacks of the Belt and Road Initiative that on the way from here, for example, from Asia Pacific via China, it is fully loaded containers. On the way back, what can they do? Only euro or US dollars, banknotes maybe. It is up to 40% empty. But on the way back, Kazakhstan and Central Asian countries can additionally load up those containers and send it to here. And ASEAN countries also can do the same thing while delivering goods to Kazakhstan and into Europe further. That's one of the options to think about how to involve this area, this region, to this initiative to be implemented. The TRANS-CASPIAN international transport route, it is worth to notice that the joint work put in actions together by the participating countries along the route in recent years has created a commercial advantage of the TRANS-CASPIAN route, which is called Middle Corridor. According to the experts, trade turnover in regions along the TRANS-CASPIAN route and Eastern and Southern Europe is estimated to grow up to $922 billion by 2020. In terms of freight traffic, it is estimated over 300 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units. In the recent years, the countries along the TRANS-CASPIAN route were heavily investing in modernization and construction of new transport and logistic infrastructure along the route. Another, BAKU-TBILISI-KARS new rail line. Another important infrastructure project is this one, and it opens an access to Turkey and Southern Europe via the Mediterranean Sea using the Marmara Tunnel, which belongs to Turkey. As I was saying about ASEAN, this conjugation of the Nurlajol program with Belt and Road Initiative to be one part and conjugate it with the ASEAN activity. So as I said, that ASEAN countries can participate sending their goods to Central Asia, not by maritime, because there's only one route. It goes through the Indian Ocean to Bandar Abbas in Iran and goes to Kazakhstan. Now, the delivery from Leningrad port, part of which belongs to Kazakhstan 5 days, while it is 20 to 30 days from the sea. Another one is that we have created the first Kazakh special economic zone called Horgoz, which is located on the borderline with China. It is considered as the first foreign point after the Chinese shipping containers are crossing the Chinese border on the way to Europe. Second is Kazakhstan-Chinese joint terminal Leningrad seaport. We have purchased dry port, and nowadays we transit our goods as Kazakhstani goods without paying customs taxes or transit taxes to China, because it was a mutual agreement on it. Indeed, these two transport logistics transit hubs can offer great opportunities for increasing trade and economic potential of Kazakhstan and entire Central Asian region. We are planning to increase the transshipment capacity of Horgos up to 500,000 containers per year, as well as its processing capacity up to 4.4 million tons of cargo per year by 2020. As I mentioned earlier, we are the founding member of the Eurasian Economic Union, which is a market for 180 million people. And in this context, the Horgos Special Economic Zone is a perfect gateway to this huge market. Currently, the governments of the Eurasian Economic Union member states and Singapore are holding negotiations, as I said, and hopefully next year we'll sign it. As far as the Leningan port, which is a Kazakh-Chinese joint terminal, it offers big opportunities for BRI countries. Actually, last April's visit of Lee Hsien-loong to Beijing and Boao Forum, and signing this MOU with China on facilitating cooperation with the third parties. It's a good opportunity for involvement both the ASEAN countries and the Central Asian countries to be the third parties of this very nice mega project. The Leningan port is among the 25 largest ports in the world. It is very strategically important for Kazakhstan. As I said to you, that the time frame of delivery is squeezed 2 times at least compared to the maritime. Transportation of goods via the Horgos-Leningan land route and then by the sea to ASEAN countries would be convenient in terms of saving money and time. It is an advantage when transporting foodstuff and other perishable goods from Central Asia to the markets of Southeast Asia. Last but not least, the maritime infrastructure on the TRANS-CASPIAN multimodal route. We have the Port Aktau in the Caspian Sea. Its capacity is 19.5 million tons. And in order to ensure the uninterrupted shipment of transit cargo and the development of TRANS-CASPIAN transportation in the Caspian, we have built a railway ferry terminal in the port of Kurik near the Aktau port. Since 2016, this terminal has already transshipped more than 1.5 million tons of cargo. And in order to develop our maritime infrastructure in the Caspian Sea, the capacity of the seaports in Aktau and Kurik will be increased up to 25.6 million tons per year by 2020. At the same time, expanding the dry cargo fleet up to 20 units by 2020 will provide up to 55% of the general cargo transportation volume in the Caspian exported through the Aktau port. A few days ago, during the Eurasian Economic Union Member States Summit in Sochi, my President, Nursultan Nazarbayev, has proposed to build a ship canal to link the Caspian Sea with the Black Sea, which can open an access for Kazakhstan and Central Asian states to the Mediterranean Sea and Atlantic Ocean. Actually, this idea is called the Eurasian Canal, and it was initially proposed by President Nazarbayev back in 2006. According to experts, 700-kilometer-long canal would be 4 times longer than the Suez Canal and 8 times longer than the Panama Canal, and the project is estimated to cost $6 billion and take 10 years to complete. Along with those railroads and seaports, I already told you about Western Europe, Western China route, but we have also the railway link Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran, which complements to the Silk Road economic belt and strengthening the positions of Kazakhstan as a transit hub. I made it within 55 minutes. I'm so happy that they managed to do that, and thank you very much for being patient with my awkward English. And I'm open to your questions until they are not awkward.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. You really deserve this hands. I mean, this is very exhaustive. You covered more than one specific subject. By the way, you all have probably in your flyers received the ambassador's bio notes what the bio notes failed to include is the fact of his cultural affinity with South Asia. He is an excellent singer,
No.
which is not confined to the Turkic language, though I'm sure he's a singer in that as well, but in Hindi. And before the meeting began, he sang to me several lines from Raj Kapoor's film Shri 420 in a tune that matched the original. However, I will now open the floor for Q&A, and I'll request that you keep the questions short with aiming to receive a short answer also, and identify your affiliation. The floor is open. Your name and affiliation, of course. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for this interesting talk. My name is Termsak from next door ASEAN Study Center. In ASEAN, the member countries are also discussing how to respond to China BRI. I would like to ask Ambassador whether members of the Eurasian Economic Union, do you discuss among yourself how to come up with a common response, or just each on its own dealing with China directly? As a group in the Eurasian Economic Union, do you have a group position on how to respond to BRI?
Mr. Sam, thank you for a question. When I told you that my president instructed me to open up 2 regions, I was thinking how to sort of expedite that issue. When I was appointed to here, before coming here, my trip was delayed because your Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Kopokun, visited my country. Your ambassador, Mr. Zulkifli Baharudin, visited my country, and I was accompanying both of them to meet our dignitaries, including our Prime Minister. And at every meeting, Mr. Kopokun and your ambassador was saying that Singapore business has a limited knowledge about Kazakhstan. And that provoked me to do something connected to familiarization of my country in Singapore. In 2005 to 2009, I was a Consul General of Kazakhstan to Hong Kong. And in 2006, we have arranged Kazakhstan-Hong Kong Business Forum, which was called Investment Climate in Kazakhstan and Investment Opportunities of Hong Kong. It was in the newly built Four Seasons Hotel. We brought 120 Kazakh businesses, and we attracted 200 best businesses from Hong Kong. It was a very fruitful discussion. At that time, the newly created Kazakh Temasek, Samruk Kazakh National Holding, was present in its entirety. And we were discussing the points of investing in Kazakhstan and opening up Hong Kong for Kazakhstan. As a result, 1 month thereafter, we opened a direct air flight from Almaty to Hong Kong, and we signed a 15 days visa-free regime. Within half a year, 100 Kazakh business guys opened their offices in Hong Kong. Taking that into account, I decided to arrange a similar thing in Singapore, and I consulted it with Mr. Kopokun and with Mr. Gochoktong. They accepted this idea, saying that it would be a very good thing if best business of Singapore would know more about Kazakhstan. And I drafted the program, and the plenary session was devoted to the addresses by Gochoktong, by Prime Minister of Kazakhstan / Deputy Prime Minister / Minister of Trade and Investment. While I was Ambassador at Large on Human Rights in the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Kazakhstan for 4 years, I was supervising the team of Tony Blair, who was advisor to my president for 3 years, and I personally know Tony Blair. And I called him and asked if I arranged the forum in Singapore, would you be the guest of honor or guest speaker? He said he would. We have the Council for Foreign Investors under the President of Kazakhstan, which is comprised of 33 biggest companies around the world. It's nine major oil companies. It's Lakshmi Mittal, Lakshmi, who has become a billionaire due to purchasing Kazakhstani steel amalgamation. And my idea was to invite at least 5 or 6 of those big guys from Mitsubishi, Marubeni, EBRD, Lakshmi Mittal, to come to talk for Kazakhstan. It's not Kazakhs bragging about it, but it's foreigners. And I wrote the letters to them, and the positive response came from Lakshmi, from Jack Ma, Alibaba. And I asked them to be open and straightforward and to start without deficiencies and drawbacks, because it's like in a decent business, once lied, then never trusted. And they agreed on it. And I also wanted to invite the heads of our big national holdings like Kazakh Temasek, Kazakh IE, Kazakh SBF, for them to deliver and to make a presentation. And we planned 3 breakout sessions. One is to be devoted to 10 special economic zones in Kazakhstan, to startups, to digitalization, to Horgos, to investment climate, to taxation laws. And when the Kazakh Temasek president came here, he has had a look at this draft and said, this is a very nice draft, and our Kazakh Temasek will be main co-organizer and main sponsor of that event. He went back and showed this program to Prime Minister, and Prime Minister said, I will be delivering a speech at this forum. And I started preparing the visit, official visit of my Prime Minister. But suddenly he was changed position. And thereafter, I accompanied Gochok Tong to Kazakhstan, and he was telling my President and my Prime Minister, saying that the initiative of the embassy to hold this forum is very vital and very timely. Then President said, okay, we promise that the Prime Minister would be present at it, but as far as there's a new Prime Minister, he has to have some time to get adjusted, to pay his visits to priority countries. Let's put up it for 1.5 years. Now it's put up till this coming fall, and I'm preparing in the fall the visit of my Prime Minister on the sidelines of which there would be this forum. And while arranging this familiarization for the best business, and SBF promised us that they will arrange 200 best businessmen to be participating in it, I was also thinking about the practical result of this forum. Usually when a new ambassador comes to a new country, he works on creating the bilateral Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which consists of the officials of deputy ministers, which is a sort of bureaucratic machine, which is a sort of working very slowly. We decided to go beyond that frame and decided to create the Kazakhstan Asia Pacific Trade and Investment Chamber, the co-establishers of which would be not the officials, but only the big business guys. And it was meant for what? To create headquarters in Singapore, to involve the businesses from 10 ASEAN countries, from Kazakhstan, Central Asia, Eurasian Economic Union, from China, Japan, India, Korea, to unify the database of all the SMEs, small and medium businesses and enterprise and big businesses of our region and this region, to put experts in the headquarters, to make an outsourcing of the similar projects, be that one in Myanmar and others in Kyrgyzstan, one in Kazakhstan and others in Singapore, and to bring them together and to strike a deal. This is one of the activities. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't finish it. Okay, let me. And what else? As far as we delayed this forum, we have inaugurated this company. 5 ASEAN countries are the members of it. It works since December 2016. We have already struck 2 deals, be that small one, 1.5 and 9 million US dollars. But it starts working. And when I presented this platform to Eurasian Economic Union chairman, former president of Armenia, Sarkisyan, he said, Mr. Ambassador, you arranged the platform which was thinking to arrange in 5-10 years. We are now laying a platform which will be good for BRI. Now, if we combine the efforts of Eurasian Economic Union, this platform here, and we want to expand this entity to make it Euraptic, Eurasian Pacific Trade and Investment Chamber. That's what be a sort of a task which was assigned to me by President to open up these two areas.
Thank you. Okay. By the way, you mentioned the quality of Kazakh diplomacy. I've had the privilege of working very closely with two of your foreign ministers, Tukayev and Yerzan Kazikhanov. Absolutely top-drawer diplomats, both of them. And in the United Nations, by the way, I'm in the Security Council. You've played a very effective role. You chaired also, when I was there in New York, you were chairing the Counter-Terrorism Committee at that point in time. I'll recognize Dr. Rani Malan of ISAS.
Thank you so much for your, thank you, Your Excellency, for your really interesting presentation. Also to see the growth of Korgos, which is going to be the world's largest dry hub, is a fascinating story. And yet, the larger question of Kazakhstan in how it fits in the BRI, and also the huge investments that have come from China, right? I've read about estimates of about 30 billion US dollars, 50 projects. That's a lot of money. China's the largest investor in Kazakhstan. And, you know, when one looks at some of the other countries that have had or are planning on having large cash flows coming in from China through the BRI, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they have fallen into this debt trap of being dependent on China because it's the largest investor. What are Kazakhstan's plans to be sure to avoid that kind of debt trap scenario?
Was it Bilahari Kausikan? I follow his Facebook, and he always posts very interesting articles from different sources like New York Times, SCMP, Chance News Asia, and he cited Lee Hsien-loong saying, when two big elephants struggle, the grass suffers. When they are sort of in good connections or making love, the grass suffers again. You know, I was telling you about the pragmatism of my president. We have immediately mounted the policy of multi-vectoral foreign policy. And we are playing good games with three big entities in the world. It is United States, it is Russia, and China. We are 1.1% population comparing with population of China. China already invested around 30 billion, but we are strategic partners. Kazakhstan has managed to persuade and to insist that we have signed strategic partnership agreements with the United States, and the United States has signed it only with 5 countries. We signed the same strategic partnership with China, which has only 5 similar agreements. And we have a perennial friendship agreement with Russia. Anyway, we are dependent on Russia because the 30% of population is Russia and we are mingled. We are dependent on China economically because China is an energy-hungry country. Whatever, you see, Chinese have built 3,000 long kilometer pipeline from the Caspian Sea on their money to China, and it's only 9 billion barrels, 9 billion tons, which is nothing for China. China swallows everything. We are not fearing China at all. We are at par with them. We are strategic partners because we have a good balance and we have security guarantees of all 5 nuclear states of the world. You know why we are abandoning renouncing our nuclear weaponry? We are renouncing against the security guarantees of these 5 nuclear powers of the world, which we can use as a shield in case China would want to declare war against us, or Russia, or whatever. That's why we are playing politics pragmatically, and we are doing well with all of them. See, we are economically very much more dependent on Russia even, and we are not afraid that we are dependent on them. Of course, some political dependence is there. We cannot avoid that. We are also a small country by population. Look at Singapore. It plays good play between U.S. and China, and it's not suffering. And it plays well, very well, and nobody accuses Singapore for its diplomatic shifts between the two big powers. But this is what the reality is, and we're not afraid. If we would be completely dependent on China, by now we would be the province of China. But we're still a very independent, a very sovereign, very independent entity, economic entity in the world. And we're the best economy in Central Asia. We're playing good.
Yeah. Dr. Maran's question was also if you'll become indebted to China in terms of debt.
We are also, we are having debts, and we'll have it for another 100 years, no problem. But we're paying back. And it's not only us, it's the whole world.
Yes, Dr. Shortley.
Actually, China will swallow the whole world. When these colonists from European Union and from America, they left Africa. Now half Africa is Chinese. Half ASEAN countries' population is Chinese. Now what happened? Were there any wars or rifle shots or whatever? I don't see that. See, it's in my view, it's the U.S. is a democratic country spreading its democracy, but it brings losses of lives in Syria and Libya, while China does not declare and does not impose their democracy with weapons in nowhere, just brings economic dividends, and there is no people dying, thousands of them, like in Libya or Ukraine or what. Just compare. It's not from political points, it's just from human being incentives. Just think about it. I was 8 years a human rights ambassador at large, and I was always tough negotiator with the Europeans and Americans when they were imposing their human rights on my country without taking into account the specificities of my country. That's the only thing which they don't want to listen to. But if they listen to that, they would be managing to proceed with their targets and to be the police of the world in its positive sense. Lee Kuan Yew told my president, they will press you on human rights, don't listen to them. First economics, then politics. Lee Kuan Yew was called autocrat, a dictator, something, but being blamed for so many years in the Congress, you see this trilogy, no tide, no time. There was a moment when he was crying when he was ousted from Malaysian Federation because he found the country was nothing. And he was crying because he didn't know what to do with it. And for many years, he was putting on the second place the human rights aspect, although he was blamed. But at the Congress in the US Senate, they were standing applauding for him for 15 minutes. How come the Americans with their democracy applaud to a dictator who doesn't follow the human rights? That's the sort of nonsense for me.
Dr. Jivanta Shortley from ISAS.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, to hear about your country and get a perspective of your view. In all these discussions, India is always conspicuously absent in Central Asia, it seems, and one often reads that India lost an opportunity with the end of the Soviet Union of engaging with Central Asia. Do you agree that's still the case? Has anything changed recently? Has India shown more attention? Is there any hope of India regaining an influence in this region? Thank you.
I said that Lakshmi Mittal is an Indian who is a billionaire because of Kazakhstan. We have retained very good relations with India. We are developing it. But unfortunately, there is the law of capitalism. Chinese came and paid more for our oil fields rather than ONG in India. That's why they win. Although we love India, but we want to have $500 million more for our oil field from Chinese rather than from Indian. If you can afford, come and buy. Nothing personal, nothing political. Yeah, India buys Kazakh uranium. Yeah.
Will you identify yourself?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Hi. Hi, Doctor, and all guests. Good afternoon. My name is Zhong Huan Ivan from Partnership Clubs. So you just now I heard you mention about economic zone and economic benefits between Singapore and partners and Kazakhstan business partners, and you're not sure whether the outcome will be good or not good. So suddenly you reminded me of 3 months ago, I started my small little project, Partnership Clubs. Initially, that time there's only one partner. Right now, there's 157 partners, mostly from Singapore. There are only some from Australia and some from UAE and US. And they are all eager to venture into overseas to look for business partners in F&B industry, manufacturing, all industries. So they are asking me for help. So that's why I started from offline to become online platform. So the Spain, not professor, Spain counselor, Commerce of Spain, they are interested. They say, come June or July, come to Spain. We can have a partnership with our it's good because you can have business partnership with the Spain partners. Then they can come to Singapore and bring their goods over. Same for Singapore to Spain. So I just emailed to the Commerce of Spain, the embassy of Spain. So I met the two of them. So suddenly you reminded me, hey, maybe I can help the business partner of Singapore to also venture into to have partnership with the Kazakhstan counterparts. So I'm not sure whether this will benefit. Yeah, thank you.
Ivan, take my card. I will connect you with the president of the CAPTIC, or the Kazakhstan Asia Pacific. They will help you with that issue. Yeah, actually, one problem here with developing this partnership is FTA agreement.
Very good.
You know, taxes is a problem elsewhere.
When is it going to be signed then?
Early next year, hopefully.
Good. Floor is still open, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Nothing about uranium? Okay. All right. In which case, it's also time. We will conclude our excellent seminar. Thank you very much, Ambassador Suleiman, for not only talking to the specific topic, but also giving a very, very thorough introduction to Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, not many of us are awfully familiar with your country, but now, of course, we are. And we hope that when this FTA is signed with Singapore, or even before that, and I'm also personally aware that there are a lot of interactions going on in the business world between you and Singapore. And also, I spoke of the cultural affinities that you have with South Asia, and it wasn't just a joke. I mean, it does show the kind of influence that soft power of India has over Central Asia. So I hope that this discussion will help deepen our understanding of Kazakhstan's policies, and also certainly of the principal subject of our discussions today, BRI. Might I request all of you to give another round of applause for our distinguished speaker, after which I will invite you to a cup of tea reception with our speaker, but not before I give you, Ambassador, a token of our appreciation on behalf of ISAS.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Before we go, I would just want to thank my brother and my colleague, Ambassador Zainul Abidin. I'm so honored that this very prominent person, parliament member, is attending this seminar. He is very helpful with many issues to help to boost relations between Kazakhstan and Singapore. Thank you, Dr.
Absolutely.